Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Rachel Sachs, the president of the Filipino Canadian Lawyers Network. And today we are lucky to have with us 4 candidates running for bencher as part of the Good Governance Coalition. Jennifer Gold, Jonathan Rosenthal, Neha Chugh, and Natalia Rodriguez. And so I am going to turn off my camera and allow you to focus entirely on these lovely people.
Jonathan, do you want to go first? You're an incumbent bencher, and I think it'd be great to hear your perspective on things. And do tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Jonathan Rosenthal. I'm a criminal lawyer in Toronto. I'm a sole practitioner. I've almost always been a sole practitioner, but for a couple of months. So I understand what it's like to be a sole practitioner, not work for the government, not work for a big firm. I first was elected a bencher in 2015. And the reason I ran is all of the criminal lawyer benchers were timed out because there's a time limit on how long you could be a bencher. And it was very important for the criminal lawyers to have a seat at the table. And some people suggested I run because of the amount of teaching I do in advocacy that I might actually get elected. And I was elected in 2015. And it was very difficult to learn what a bencher's role is, that you actually regulate in the public interest. And one of the first things that I realized was that the reason why we have self-regulation in Ontario and in Canada, which is the exception to the rest of the world, is because we did regulate well in the public interest, which means protecting the public. We're not a lawyers advocacy group. Our job isn't to, get the best deal for lawyers and lower dues and, get people deals on cell phones. That's not what the law says. We're a regulatory body. And we are actually given our power to regulate by the province through the Loss Act, and that power can be taken away. The reason I'm running again is self-regulation is at risk. No one wanted, I certainly didn't want to run as part of a coalition. And what became apparent is if we didn't form a coalition, the full stop, the reinvention of the stop stoppers, they would do exactly what they did in 2019, which was split the vote. They did not get the most votes. They had everyone who supported their views vote for them, and then the rest of the vote was split amongst a number of people. I've seen what has gone on at the Law Society since 2019, and I can tell you that there's no doubt in my mind, should the full stop be successful in this election, it will be the end of self-regulation. They have brought a number of irresponsible motions, and to highlight but a few. So they brought 2 motions to drastically reduce fees. They wanted to cut fees by 25%. And I call that a crowd pleaser motion. Who doesn't want their fees cut? But if you cut fees, you've got to look at the other side of the equation. In other words, where are we going to save 25% of our spending? And, in advocacy, and Jennifer, just cut me off when I've gone too long. In advocacy, I always teach facts, not conclusions. And they can't give any facts of what they would actually want to reduce. The closest they've got to it is really 2 parts. One said we can reduce what we spend on professional regulation. Well, sorry, folks, we're actually in the regulation business. That's what the Law Society does. So you can't say, I want to cut fees by 25% or 10% without saying, well, what are you going to cut? What are you going to do? And how are you going to properly regulate lawyers in the public interest with that sort of reduction? But again, it's a crowd pleaser motion. They have brought a motion that they only wanted names of those being called to the bar being read by benchers. And I can tell you, I had to do that for a number of years. And to me, it was really troubling because I would actually spend several hours using a website to properly pronounce someone's name. Because I know as a teacher that to many people, that is the most important day of their adulthood. There's nothing better being a bencher than going to the bar and hearing the whoops from the crowd. And I was always nervous that I would say someone's name wrong. So the Law Society decided responsibly, why don't we have a professional name caller? They brought a motion to get rid of that, to say only benchers should read the names. And some of them went as far as saying, this day's just not about the calls to the bar. This is about the benchers too. And basically, suck it up. You know, if someone gets your name wrong, well, that's part of being Canadian. To me, that's just incredibly disrespectful. They brought a motion. I'm the chair of the proceedings. Jennifer, I'm going on too long. Just give me one of these and I'll stop.
You know what, take a couple more minutes and then we'll hear from Neha and Natalia. I'll speak a little bit and then we can always circle back.
Sure. I'm the chair of the Proceeding Authorization Committee. This is the committee that authorizes, amongst other things, disciplinary hearings, interim suspensions, disclosure of certain information. By statute, the only people, for obvious reasons, that can attend that meeting are those on the committee. Highly confidential things are discussed at these meetings that, if proceedings aren't authorized, ought not to be shared with anyone. Incredibly personal information. People's licenses are going to be suspended. If it goes to a hearing, granted, it becomes public. They brought a motion that anyone, any bencher could attend that. That was part of an omnibus motion, and they didn't look at the details. But that just shows what bad governance is. If they pass that motion, those on the tribunal the following week could show up to my committee meeting. It's wrong. They wanted to abolish the code of conduct. Now, as lawyers, we're all bound by a code of conduct, the rules of professional conduct. They want to get rid of the bencher code of conduct. And I just say, why would a bencher not be governed by a code of conduct? They have shown incredible disrespect. I would go as far as saying contempt for the Law Society staff, right up to the CEO and the CFO. One of the first things I realized in 2015, how incredibly competent the vast majority of people who work at the Law Society are. I can't tell you how much I've learned. They've treated them with contempt. You often get confidential material as a bencher for obvious reasons that I won't go into. Two of them actually breached that confidence. One of them actually tweeted an in-camera motion. And I don't think they did that maliciously and said, I'm going to breach my duty of as a fiduciary duty. I think they brought because they just didn't know any better. It's now been disclosed that one member of the full stop team, one incumbent bencher, has changed his address to an auto body shop in Toronto so he could run in Toronto. We all know that they could only find 15 or 16 people to run in Toronto. One of them changed their address the day the nominations closed to an auto body shop in Toronto. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get into that. Changed his phone number to a 416 number, changed his fax number to a 416 number. So why am I running? It's because I'm proud to be a lawyer. I'm one of these people who still says proudly, I'm a lawyer. That's what I do for a living. To me, it's not a job, it's a profession. And that is what I think really distinguishes lawyers, for example, from someone who sells a television in a big box store. That's why I spend the vast majority of my time teaching, because I truly care about the profession, what it means to be a lawyer, and how it's such an honorable profession, how it's such an important profession. So that is why I'm running for a bencher. I can tell you what my personal platform is, but I can tell you, in my opinion, the only way to preserve self-regulation is to elect the Good Governance Coalition. Because if we don't, we will lose the right of self-regulation, which is crucially important to a independent bar. You know, as a criminal lawyer, I don't want to be prosecuted. Sorry, I don't want my client to be prosecuted by the same attorney general who's regulating me, who may be prosecuting me for a disciplinary offense. It is the exception, self-regulation. And we must do everything we darn well can to make sure it's preserved.
Thank you, Jonathan. You went right to the heart of the matter. Neha, do you want to chat next a little bit about why you decided to become a bencher and what's important to you?
Sure. So I decided to run for bencher this year. I was thinking about it last year, and I kind of put a feeler out on Twitter, and then people reached out to me and said, you would be a great bencher. And I still didn't see it, but as I've been putting together my platform and I've been talking about it more and more at events like this, I've been getting more excited about giving the region that I work in and small communities all across Ontario a voice at convocation. I want to give women in criminal defense a voice at convocation. I want to give legal aid practices a voice at convocation. I'm running for bencher with the coalition. Some of you may know me from the Criminal Lawyers Association or Twitter, or from Solo Queens, which is the side hustle that my best friend and I put together last year. Some of you may know me from the Katzman Award, from my speech at the opening of the courts in October. Or some of you just may know me from my chatting with you. I've been a criminal defense lawyer in the East Region since 2011. I'm a mom of 3 young, active kids. I love my job. I love serving the community. I love serving the community's most vulnerable and giving them a voice in court. I find my work to be very meaningful. I love courthouses and courthouse conversations. I loved Zoom humor, and I still love Zoom humor. I grew up in Guelph. I grew up as the daughter of immigrants from New Delhi. I'm the first child. I was really encouraged to have a career in STEM, but I defied my parents as much as possible. Life and my husband's job brought me to a small firm practice. I went to law school in North York at Osgoode Hall. I never thought I would have a small town practice. I articled and summered for criminal defense sole practitioners in Toronto. And when I articled in Toronto, criminal lawyers were on strike with legal aid. And so they were striking they had a work to rule, and they were not taking on murder files. And so at that time, it was the first time in my practice, or as a articling student, where I saw the tension between lawyers and legal aid, and lawyers and the government. And it was a really unique opportunity watching my principals go through that, to understand why it's so important for lawyers to have their own voice, criminal defense lawyers especially, and for the legal aid portfolio to have proper management. As a business owner, I have 3 lawyers who work for me. We have a student program assistants. We have office space to manage. I also manage prosecution contracts, and I'm a member of the board of directors of the Law Commission of Ontario, which is Ontario's main law reform agency. I have a passion for law, and I have a passion for business. And I think that I can bring that to convocation. But what I'm really passionate about is what I've seen happen to the bar, to solo and small firms in the past 3 years. I'd say the pandemic really ignited it, as I've seen people leave private practice, shut their front door, and walk away from private practice. Either they go to government or they retire. They're walking away from the business administration of it. In the olden days, and I'm going to say the olden days is 2019 and prior, there was succession planning that happened. People would bring on a junior to sell their practices to, or to take over their practice. In today's day and age, where everything is electronic, people are simply locking the door and walking away. That has a disproportionate impact on places like Cornwall and Guelph and Thunder Bay and Kenora, where people are now waiting in the hallways with legal aid certificates, waiting for lawyers to be available to help them, but there's just not enough lawyers to help them. It has a disproportionate impact on legal aid files, on legal aid clients, and low to medium income individuals in our community. I also want to say that while that is happening, we have NCA and ITL lawyers, so NCA graduates and internationally trained lawyers, who are caught in that middle ground, in that middle space, where they really want to practice law, but they have many administrative hurdles to get through. And I'm a big supporter of FOLA's motion FOLA has brought a motion to investigate what is going on in solo and small firms, in small communities, and to see how we can bridge that gap. And I think that there needs to be some I see Rachel is applauding, and I'm a big supporter of this. My brother is an NCA graduate, and he came and worked at my firm for 2 years, and it was invaluable. And I've supported NCA students at my firm, and I know that there's a gap that needs to be bridged, an access to justice gap that needs to be bridged. So here are the issues that keep me up at night. First of all, I'm a mom who's trying to do it all. And I see lots of women leaving the profession, and lots of women who are type A women, and that's what gets us into law school in the first place. We're all trying to do it all, and we don't have the right supports in place. So that's the number one issue that keeps me up at night. The number two issue is I've watched tensions heat and cool with our relationship with Legal Aid Ontario. Number three is that more and more lawyers have left the private bar. It's hard to be a lawyer. We have a lot of responsibilities. We eat a lot of drive-through. We are paying $2 a liter for gas. We are paying $8 for butter and $8 for 4 liters of milk. So while the cost of living has gone up, legal aid rates have stayed low. Cost of running a business has gone up. It's now $75 for a box of paper when it used to be $40. So we have seen it become very difficult to run a business, and we need the supports in place to be able to keep our businesses open. Modernization was a going concern in the previous election. It was something that was always on our mind, but we didn't really give a lot of attention to. Today, it has exploded as an issue that is to be contended with. I ask myself, can I keep up? Do I know how? And most importantly, can I afford to keep up? And can I afford to learn how? So, pardon me? Oh, sorry. So overall, as I've watched access to justice suffer, especially in communities outside of urban centers, I know that we have an access to justice gap that we must contend with. My approach to being a bencher is going to be to roll up my sleeves. It's going to be like running a business, looking at every line item like a small business owner, understanding what the cost of butter is, but also what the needs of our community are. Consultations and reaching out to every member of the community contextually. So NCA students, moms, new graduates, people who are retiring and thinking about succession planning. Every single individual needs to be consulted and talk to about what their needs are so that we can keep the bar vibrant and thriving. That's my platform, if there's any questions.
Thank you, Neha. Natalia, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and the issues that are important to you?
Sure. So like Neha, I'm also the daughter of immigrants. I guess I'll start at the beginning. My parents came to Canada. They struggled a lot financially. So it was kind of humble beginnings for me. I grew up mainly in the Toronto area, but also in the Canary Islands. We moved back and forth between Toronto and Spain, where my dad is from. And I finally came back to Canada and settled here after high school to continue my studies and to begin my undergrad education. So as a result, I'm fluent in Spanish and English. I often service clients in Spanish when they need that. Before going to law school, I was actually a teacher. So I've been in a regulated profession before law, which was the teaching profession. And actually teaching is what led me to want to become a lawyer, because I saw, I was teaching in areas that were very kind of high needs areas of the city. And the families needed a lot of supports and the children needed a lot of supports as well. And I found it difficult to be able to advocate for the children who were either in neglectful situations or even abusive situations at home. I really felt like I wanted to be in a profession where I could advocate for others from a position of knowledge, and not just, wanting to do that, but not having the tools to do that effectively, essentially. So I went to law school. I'm a Queen's grad, and I was called in 2011. I currently practice at a small litigation boutique, Conway Baxter Wilson in Ottawa, and I've pretty much most of my private practice has been in the Ottawa area. Prior to that, I was also at a full service national firm. I focus on civil litigation with an emphasis on commercial litigation and public law litigation as well, and appellate advocacy. And I do other types of work too when the opportunity presents itself, mainly commission work. So I was commission counsel on the Elliott Lake Commission of Inquiry, which was a provincial inquiry some years ago. And more recently, the Public Order Emergency Commission, which was a federal inquiry that wrapped up just about a month ago. So those are kind of the work that I like to do that's more in the public interest as opposed to, client-based work. I've always been involved in the legal profession kind of as extracurricular activities, if you will, in various capacities, including, mentoring junior associates and articling students. And I really enjoy that work. I'm a mentor in several different organizations, so I have a chance to speak to younger members of the bar and understand from them what it is that, what are the barriers for them, what are they finding difficult in the profession, and what are some of the issues that they're encountering to be able to be successful in the profession. I've also been involved in various diversity and inclusion committees with the Advocate Society. I'm on the board of directors of the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association. So I'm the director of policy and programs. And I've worked in, I've been a director in the not-for-profit sector as well for some kind of community-based organizations. So I have governance experience, and I'm very involved in the legal profession, just kind of generally. I'm also very much concerned with equity and diversity issues through RODA, which is the Roundtable of Diversity Associations, and also through the LSO's Equity Advisory Group, which is made up of different organizations, such as the Canadian Hispanic Bar Association. And I think out of everything I do, my kind of favorite extracurricular is definitely mentoring. I really do enjoy speaking to younger lawyers and hearing from them what their issues are, and kind of sharing with them my perspective and my my kind of journey through law, which has been very interesting, at least so far. In terms of, so that's a little bit of what I've done and my background. I considered running, I think maybe 4 years ago in 2019. It crossed my mind. I thought, that's something maybe I'll do in the future. Even this time around, I wasn't totally sure that I would run, but then something spoke to me, and I think it was, I've also kept apprised of what's going on at the Law Society and in convocation and what's happened in the last 4 years. And I began to be increasingly concerned about what I was seeing coming out of the Law Society and out of convocation. And what I mean by that is, there were certain benchers that were, I think, as Jonathan very kind of clearly articulated, bringing motions that were irresponsible or were essentially time wasting and taking away valuable time and resources that could have been used for real issues. And I think as I saw that unfolding, something within me said, you need to do something. Put your hand up. This is important. This is serious. We're at a critical point that, and it's not just to do something to give back to the profession, although it's also that. It's more important than that. It's really self-governance and self-regulation being at risk, and our own ability to be at arm's length from the government that was essentially at risk, and that's the way I saw it. So there were two sentiments going on. One was a sense of urgency. I can't wait another 4 years to put my hand up. This is a really important time. And then also the wanting to contribute further to the profession. And so that to me were the two feelings that really were the impetus for me wanting to run. and in terms of wanting to serve the profession, I very much feel indebted to the profession. I think, you know, being a lawyer has fulfilled me immensely and has given me a lot of just fulfillment and excitement, challenge, and just, it's been a real, it's a real honor to be able to do what I do every day. And it's given me the tools really to be of service to others. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the many opportunities for growth that the profession has provided me with. And so I really feel, since I've started in the profession, I feel compelled to give back to a profession that's given me so much. And so to me, then being a bencher would be kind of an impactful and a significant way to give back to the profession in the public interest. So that's a little bit about why I wanted to run. The other thing that I saw was that it seemed to me that while we were at a turning point in terms of self-regulation and convocation, it also seemed like there were forces, societal forces, that were converging at this time as well. So, you know, there are socioeconomic realities that were not present maybe 5 or 10 years ago. There have been leaps and bounds in technological advancements, even in the past, you know, year or even 6 months. And even this worldwide pandemic that we've all been through has really changed the way that we deliver legal services. And so all of these things converging to me meant that the Law Society had to be prepared to contend with a lot of these issues. And it didn't seem to me that as structured or as convened, that convocation was in a position to do that. Again, because we were spending time on, you know, whether or not we should have a name reader for calls to the bar. And so to me, we have to be able to respond to these realities. We have to be able to adapt to all of these changes, and we have to be able to do that such that the profession can thrive into the future. So, so that's my impetus for running. That's why I want to be a bencher, and I think, you know, through my different exposure to different viewpoints and being a part of different associations, being affiliated with different groups of people, having worked with all types of individuals and having worked in different workplaces, I think I can bring all of those perspectives to convocation. And I think it's important to have a diversity of views, which is why I wanted to run with the coalition, because the coalition really does bring together such a variety of views with people with all sorts of different types of practices from different parts of Ontario, and bringing with them unique life experiences as well that I think will be really valuable to convocation. And very quickly, I know I've been speaking for a little bit now, in terms of the issues that are important to me, access to the profession is very important to me. So, you know, I think looking at how articling positions may be impacted by the minimum compensation, which I think minimum compensation is absolutely necessary. And I'm glad that's something that the convocation was able to pass. And just making sure that we are not going to lose articling. And to me, it's such a fundamental way of bridging the gap between law school and practice. And you know, if we are going to lose any positions as a result of the minimum compensation, what can we do to make up for that? How do we shore up the LPP program as well to make sure that everybody has access to the profession? We also hire NCA candidates, and we've been very supportive of NCA candidates in our firm, and they have been great students. So I share the same concerns that Neha has with respect to NCA candidates, and so those are some of the issues that I want to be involved in. And again, how do we leverage technological advances? How is that going to relate to competency? How do we need to regulate technological competency further? And do we need to regulate the use of artificial intelligence in practice, for example? So these are kind of the future looking things, and not so future, because again, artificial intelligence is here and people are already incorporating it into their practice. But I think we need to be forward looking and to be able to anticipate what's coming our way and what disruptors are going to be coming to the profession. So I have a lot more to say, but I will turn the floor back to our moderator, Jennifer.
I just kind of volunteered myself, but thank you, Natalia, Neha, Jonathan. It's wonderful hearing from you. I think my own views align very much with yours. Like Natalia, Neha, I'm second generation Canadian or child of immigrant parents, and I've been practicing family law for 21 years. And it was only until 2016 that I became really involved in the legal community. Until then, I was really focused on practice. I'm a partner of a small firm in Peel Region. We have an office in Brampton and Mississauga. We're a firm of 11 lawyers now. We've grown from 3 when we first started in 2008. And the reason I got really involved in the legal profession in 2016 is my daughter became a teenager and started to express an interest in becoming a lawyer. And it was a time in our society where misogynistic language was very prevalent in the news, whether it was the Trump-Clinton election or, politicians here. And that really caused me concern. I felt that for many years I had been complacent. And I wanted to see for the next generation a legal profession that is inclusive. And I thought, from the perspective of a woman, we haven't achieved equality yet. There are issues with pay equity and discrimination and harassment in the profession. And the ghettoization of women and other racialized people, excuse the cat, in private practice and sole and small practice, I'd say. And I wanted to create some change, and I joined the Women's Law Association of Ontario to work on that. And so we follow, a great deal of what's happened at the Law Society over the last 4 years or so. And when they were called the Stop SOP slate 4 years ago, and they ran on the basis that the statement of principles should be abolished, that it was constituted forced speech. And the statement of principles was a recommendation in the challenges facing racialized licensees report. And it was just one of many recommendations. And, our group, the coalition, is not seeking to revive it because, frankly, there are many ways to achieve equity, not just one path. And, I think that's something we need to explore. Discrimination harassment is still a reality in the profession, and we can see that from the report of the Discrimination Harassment Council. The Discrimination Harassment Council is a program offered by the Law Society of Ontario, where individuals who experience discrimination harassment can consult with counsel about their options. It's confidential. And we saw that there was a surge in complaints during the Me Too movement, and largely by women. And complaints even throughout the pandemic have been pretty stable. So I'm a bit of a stats nerd, so I review the reports and then track them. But there's been comments by the Full Stop slate, at least I know of one of the members of that slate, that have suggested that complaints are overinflated. And it worries me because they took steps to remove one equity initiative, which was the statement of principles. And what else are they going after? And is that what they're seeking to cut when they're talking about reducing our Law Society fees? So I've never been a bencher before. This is my first time running, and I'm running not necessarily for myself or for our generation, but for the next one coming, for the changing makeup of lawyers and paralegals. I went to a recent call to the bar and was thrilled about the diversity I saw. But I want to make sure that everybody that becomes a lawyer or paralegal has a place here. And as well, like Natalia said, that there isn't this ghettoization of women and racialized people in the LPP program. And that's what I'm seeing, or NCA candidates that have no other options. So these are real challenges facing the legal profession, and I hope that people vote for candidates that are going to address them and address them seriously and mindfully, and not from a position of fear, but from a position of wanting progress and an inclusive legal profession. That's all I have to say. I don't know if any Jonathan or Natalia or Neha have anything else to add that you may have forgotten to mention when you were speaking, or if anybody has any questions for us.
I think what I wanted to add is I've just been, the more and more I'm educated about the full stoppers or the stop stoppers, the more and more I'm seeing the double speak and the misinformation. I'm working on my PhD, and I took a class called News, and Fake News. And it was an analysis of a lot of the way that misinformation is being disseminated on the internet. And I see a lot of linkages there. It went from, the information went from the Good Governance Coalition is going to bring back the Statement of Principles to this new thing I've seen today, which was the Good Governance Coalition was responsible for the Statement of Principles. Now, not only is that factually incorrect, it's actually just a lie. Like, it is not true at all. And it is, I think that John, you used the word crowd pleaser, but it is beyond being a crowd pleaser. It's just, what's the best way of describing it? Maybe my friends can help me here.
So how do you combat that? So how will you combat the full stop, group?
By getting put in, by making sure, by campaigning really hard, getting my platform out there, and doing my best to get them out of convocation. We're running as 40, running as an entire coalition. I think that's the best question. It's like, people are asking, why is it slate versus slate, or slate versus coalition? Best way to prevent vote splitting, and the best way to make sure that they don't take any of the votes and get a seat at convocation, is to make sure that all 40 of us are seen at the Law Society, and that none of them are there. Because we are, like, think about how hard we work to become lawyers and how hard we work to get here. And then to have someone just blatantly lie to us and say, oh no, this is the truth and this is what you should accept. I find that really hard to stomach, because I worked really hard to get here. I have done my best as a mom to get to pageants and to get to all my kids' stuff, but I have worked and missed all those things as a lawyer. And when my friends were out partying, I was studying in law school. I worked really, really hard to get into the seat that I'm in. To be lied to for a vote, I find that hard to stomach.
I would just, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, so Jennifer said, what are they going to cut? Equity is a very small, it's an infinitesimal part of the budget. So that's not what their cuts are about. If they make their cuts, they're going to be in the regulatory world. They're going to want to cut regulation. It's clear two of them voted against the Learn budget. They've attempted to suggest that the Law Foundation of Ontario should pay for the law libraries. And that's a great example. And when Neha's talking about what I'm going to call fake news, one of them actually said that they'll put people on the board of the Law Foundation who will insist that the Law Foundation pay $500,000 a year to for the law libraries, and maybe they'll cut a check for $5 million back payments. You can't appoint people to a board and tell them what to do. And that's the sort of things that they talk about. Now they'll go on and say, no, we want the law libraries. We're full supporters of them. Why'd you vote against the Learn budget? You cut the budget by 25%. You cut the budget by 10%. Those are big numbers. That's not equity. The equity budget is way less than that. And it's funny when you talk about the Discipline Harassment Council, they are not full-time employees. They're paid on kind of a case-by-case or an hourly basis. So there was some suggestion we're going to appoint one more DHC, and they became all up in arms about it, many of the incumbent full stoppers, when it had actually no cost. So you mentioned discipline around DHC. It's incredibly important.
I was in an event yesterday. Sorry, Natalia, I cut you off again. I was in an event yesterday with a full stopper who was speaking, and she said, I want to cut fees. I want to cut everyone's fees, but I want to support programming that's going to do this and support programming that's going to do that. I want to support program that's going to do this, and let's have a program for this. And what about, you know, more regulation here and more regulation there, but we have to cut fees. So as a business owner, I'm thinking, okay, money has to come in order for money to go out. So what's the plan, right? Like, what really is your plan for how all of these wonderful programs that you're outlining is going to get paid for? Okay, Natalia, you really get to speak now.
No, actually, this ties in nicely to the point that I want to make, which is, you know, we need to elect people to convocation that understand regulation and that understand governance and that have experience in that area, that have been shown to be leaders in the profession, that have put their hands up before to do to be in leadership positions and to make decisions for the legal profession. And I would just encourage everybody to just look at all of the profiles and to see, you know, who has experience in boards previous to running for bencher, who has had governance experience prior, who has put their hand up to volunteer to lead some initiative that's for the benefit of the legal profession. And if there are candidates that don't have that have never put their hands up before, you know, in my view, those people are not fit to be benchers. You know, benchers really should be the best of our profession. They should be leaders in the profession. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing elite or establishment about that. It's a commitment to public service, really. And being on a board of an industry organization, you know, being a mentor for students, being on, you know, the board of a not-for-profit organization, like all of those things show a commitment to public service, and that's the type of people we need in convocation. So I would just encourage everyone to look at everybody's profiles, look at their experience, and think about who you want leading the profession. It should be proven leaders, and so that's. I think when you look at it that way, the choice is pretty clear.
So an interesting question was raised on Twitter yesterday, about if this slate, or, you know, if we manage to oust the full stop people, how will you prevent slates in the future?
So that's a great question. And we, first off, aren't a slate. We are not a voting block, because you can't be a voting block when you have independent fiduciary duty to the board. I think I think all of us agree to see if there's a way to make sure that party politics don't exist at the law side. Whether that's possible or not, we don't know. I don't know. I don't know if any of my colleagues know, but it's something that we will certainly see if that can occur, because you can't have every year this happening. We've got to go back to the principles that worked for a number of years. The leading members of the profession were elected as benchers. You had an incredibly diverse group of people from the profession. You had young, I'm going to call myself not so young. You had criminal lawyers, civil lawyers, family lawyers, government lawyers, legal aid lawyers, clinic lawyers. And I think that's what you need at the table. You need people from all sorts of different areas to be able to say, hang on, I'm a criminal lawyer. Let me tell you why that doesn't work for me. Or the solicitor to say, no, we can't do that. So that's what's important, is the leading members of the profession. People who, as a criminal lawyer, I know judges respect me, I know crowns respect me, and I hope my colleagues also respect me. I say kind of jokingly, but that's what we need at convocation. We've got to get back to that to ensure that we're not governed by government appointees who may not have as passionate a commitment to the profession as a passionate understanding of how things work.
I would just want to add that the reason I'm running in a group is because of the slate. And if they are not voted in, maybe that sends a clear message about groups. If there wasn't a slate, I would be running as an individual. One thing we can do is require greater transparency about fundraising. I'm really concerned about who is funding the Full Stop slate. There's no transparency about it. Are they lawyers? Are they other groups that are not licensed professionals? The Good Governance Coalition on Principle is only receiving donations from lawyers and paralegals and law firms. And so that's something I would want to examine a little closely and maybe look at restrictions on fundraising. It should be an equitable process. It shouldn't be about who has more money or what, large firm is backing you.
And if I can just add to that, I think that is correct in terms of campaign financing. And I think it also in part may answer the question of how do you limit slates in the future. So in Ontario, the Municipal Elections Act, the previous version of it, had restrictions on candidates for a municipal election and how they finance their campaign to prevent people from spending money on advertising for somebody else, campaigning for somebody else, and kind of limiting the ability for people running for city council to run together as a slate. And the way that was done was really through the financing provisions of the Municipal Elections Act. Now, those provisions have since been amended and a lot of them have been repealed. And so now there is no real prohibition on municipal councillors running together. But if we look at what were those provisions before, how were they implemented, how were they worded, and how was it done in a way that doesn't infringe on freedom of expression, because that's been a concern as well. So those are, and I think that's our commitment, is to establish a working group to look at limiting the use of slates in future elections, because right now we don't have the answers. All we know is that parties or slates in convocation are not in the public interest, especially when you think about a slate that is running on a single issue. The Law Society is tasked with doing a multitude of things. It is not a single issue regulator. And so to have a slate or a group of people running on one issue is not going to give you the best people at convocation for the job of regulating in the public interest and keeping in mind and taking into consideration all of the factors and all of the considerations that it has to have in its collective mind when it's making decisions. And so that's our promise. We're going to look at how we can do that by establishing a working group. And whatever the working group comes back with, that's what we have to work with. But we don't have the answers right now, but we know that it's not working, and it's not going to be in the public interest, and it's only going to lead to the politicization of the Law Society and eventually to the end of self-regulation, which is not what most people want.
I was asked to run 4 years ago with a senior member of the bar as a running mate. And that is something that has traditionally been, I can cite a few examples of senior benchers who have identified young let me call myself a leader, young leaders in the bar who otherwise would not have the resources, financial resources to run a campaign. Now, 4 years ago, I was 7 months pregnant with baby number 3 with 2 young kids at home. And I might have told the person to go pound salt. That person is a judge now, and look at me 4 years later. I am running for Venture, but having a running mate is a really good way to succession plan to ensure that young and vibrant energy is getting into convocation. But a running mate is different than a slate or a coalition. But I just wanted to put that out there, that this issue of running mates has been before convocation, and is something that has been a tradition.
Sounds like the Law Society is now a political party with different parties, which is really troubling. It should be non-partisan, or at least your politics should not be, part of your decision making.
I don't think we're partisan. I don't. I think we're running to get elected. We have not agreed on any other issue, and we won't agree on every other issue. When I was a bencher in 2015, we had respectful debates on issue, which is what benchers do. They debate it out. They bring what they have to the table. For example, I'm not sure if capping campaign financing is the appropriate way to do it. I'm not sure. And that's what benchers do. They'll say, listen, how can we solve this problem? We know that we shouldn't have slates. We know that we shouldn't do that. We have to do it. We have no choice. I don't think there's one of us who wanted to run as part of a group. I certainly didn't. I didn't in 2015. I didn't in 2019. And I think what we do as a proper bench is you work these things out. You take the issues. You've got an incredible staff who will see how these issues, whatever it is, how they're treated elsewhere, what other groups do, what other regulators do, what other law societies do, and then you come to a decision. So, for example, there's an issue about whether the senior staff salaries get disclosed. I can tell you that my gut feeling is they ought to be disclosed. That's my belief. I wouldn't make that decision, as convocation didn't make that decision till they took a look at it. So what are other regulators doing? If we're going to disclose that, you've got to let your staff know. So that's my personal view. Some people may disagree with me, and I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot and get into a debate, but that's what benchers do. That's how a board, which is what the benchers are, do. We make policy decisions based on good decision making, good information, and good decisions. We don't make decisions off the seat of our pants. We can't tell you. I can't tell you how to get rid of slates or parties. I can't tell you that. I'm committed to looking at it. Can I guarantee it's going to happen? No, because I don't know what it is yet. And that's what we do. But we are not a political party. We're not a group that's going to vote every way the same time. It's not, you can't do that as a bencher. You've got an independent fiduciary. One of the most disturbing things I saw at convocation, and it was during the statement of principles debate, when the stop-soppers got together and huddled with 2 non-benchers, Lisa Bildy, and I can't remember the other lawyer's name, and they all came back and voted the same way. That is not how you can possibly comply with your fiduciary duty to the board when people who aren't board members are telling you what to do. And I still remember watching that on TV and shaking my head. Lawyers should be the best regulators. Why? Because we're trained as to understand what the law is, what your obligations are, what your duties are. And to see lawyers who are seeking to be benchers changing their address on the day nominations closed, it's just not right. You know, and I'll just say one more thing. When you become a bencher, you get a locker at the Law Society, and the men's locker room's a little bigger than the women's locker room, but yours is way nicer. And you got taken in there. I got taken in there by Jim Vero, and he says, pick your locker. And it was pretty remarkable to be in that room. And you saw some of the luminaries were still light benchers, still had their locker. And he said, every locker's got a lock on it, but no one locks their locker, because if you can't trust a bencher, who can you trust? I can tell you a lot of benchers, not I, lock their lockers. But if you can't trust someone, for example, to run honestly about where their address is, you shouldn't be a lawyer, in my opinion, but there's no way you should be a bencher.
Well said. Neha, I thought your email, identifying all the benchers that, you are encouraging to vote for is excellent, actually. And I was just saying that my husband wanted a copy of it, and I'm sure we'll.
So I can only send 1,500 emails at a time, according to my email program. So tomorrow, I'm spacing it out every 48 hours. Tomorrow or Friday, you may get an email from me. But I did plagiarize that list from another bencher candidate, because the last round of emails we sent out, people said, "Where's the list? We just need a list.
Where is the list?" Anyway, it's good. I like it.
Thank you.
Pass it around.
Alicia and Rachel, I'd really like to encourage all of your members to vote, to look up the members of the Good Governance Coalition, get them engaged. Please share with them through email or however you communicate the importance of